Certain aspects of Bible criticism. I've always felt uncomfortable with Bible criticism. Many people don't like certain things. It just seems to be undermining tradition. That's the most basic problem. So about the multiple authors' claim of the Book of Isaiah. Familiar with that?
About the book of Isaiah specifically, but
Okay. Okay. The multiple authors thing is used to undermine the five books of Moses. It's composite work. They don't say it, for example, with Joshua. They don't take apart the books of Joshua and the books of the prophets like they do, except for one, Isaiah. They say, well, Sefer Yeshayahu might be attributed to the negative 7th century prophet, the eponymous name, because that's what he describes. And then after it finishes with the historical part of the book, suddenly it jumps to something that seems to be describing post or the end of the Babylonian exile. And it mentions Koresh, Cyrus, a Persian conqueror from 200 years later. So why is the Navi talking about him? So if you believe in the Torah, you believe in the Navi talking about the future, so he can actually even name a future ruler. But if you don't believe in Nevuah, you see that this obviously is something that was written later. Even though our tradition says they actually showed this to said Koresh. Look, your name is in the book. Your God has chosen you for big things. Okay, fine. And then they go even further and they say that even later sections of the book are by another anonymous prophet. So because it doesn't say a name of anybody there, it just goes into different topics altogether of future redemption. They call this Deutero Isaiah and Trito Isaiah. There was a fellow whose name his son's name is Isaiah, and he begat another son. So he told his friend he was seriously debating naming the second child Deutero Isaiah. Okay. Now, what happened? Here's the problem. I was thinking this subconsciously. Do you know what the problem with positing that later sections of the book of Isaiah were written by or composed by another anonymous Isaiah or a third Isaiah? They're just using the word because they don't know. Maybe, who knows, Hanun and Rahum. Okay? Why is that hard to believe? Because it means there's a cover-up. You know why? Because right next to the book of Isaiah, in our biblical collections, are a book that actually is composited. Which book is that? And it even says it. It's the book of Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu opens up and says, "This is the words of Yirmiyahu," and it basically continues. Nevuahs not necessarily in chronological order, and various historical stories also not in a chronological order. And then it gets to the part of the destruction of the temple and the aftermath, and how Yirmiyahu, ended up in Egypt with the survivors. And it says Ad Hina Divrei Yirmiyahu. Okay, his last nevuah, it goes back. It's actually a good literary device. Sefer Yirmiyahu ends with, by the way, years ago, before all this went down, Yirmiyahu was sent with a prophecy to the headwaters of the Euphrates River to utter a prophecy about Babylon's destruction. Okay, and this happened, a good while, many years before the destruction of the temple. And it says Ad Hina Divrei Yirmiyahu. That's the end of Yirmiyahu. Okay, this is the end of the book. And then there's a postscript, which is basically taken almost verbatim from the Book of Kings, right? As though, if you don't hold that Yirmiyahu wrote the Sefer, which, by the way, the Gemara in Bava Basra tells you, at least according to this one brisa, who the author of each book is. But already Rishonim disputed that. Like Rabbi Stav told us, just because you have one day on the Gemara doesn't mean that's the unanimous opinion. Could be there are many more that just don't need to be said, even. But it's implied that they don't hold of it. Whoever wrote the book of Yirmiyahu then tacked on a postscript, an appendix that's obviously was written later, okay, and maybe not even by Yirmiyahu, but it tells you that because it says at this point, look, I can even show it to you where it is, but the proofs get even more. Hold that thought. That's what we normally do. Where does it say? It's like, it's somewhere in the back, right? Mm-hmm. You ever read through this whole thing? See? Ad Hina Divrei Yirmiyahu. Okay? Because it starts off with Yirmiyahu. And then it picks up, Tzidkiyahu was 21 years old when he became king. It's like something from the Book of Kings. It tells you until when Yehoiachin was released from prison after Nebuchadnezzar died. Which might have been, by the way, after Yirmiyahu died. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar died, and Wil Merodach became king, and he let King Yechaniah out of prison. And things started looking up after that. But more than that, next to that book, what's after that book? Yechezkel. Yechezkel seems to be one book. But then there's a composite book, Treyasar. What do Chazal say? What is the book of Treyasar, ostensibly? Well, it's actually pretty clear. What is it? It's a number of different books, smaller Nevi'im. It is a collection of the prophetic works of 12 different Nevi'im over the course of like 4 centuries, put together by the final authors. Why? Why did they put it together? Why did they just leave it apart? For example, the book of Ruth is one small book, right? It's one small Megillah, barely a few pages. What else is a short one? Shir Shirim, a little bit longer, right? Koheles is even longer. Eicha is quite short. The Megillas are short. The tendency is you could even put all 5 Megillas together in one scroll. People do that, you know. And what Treyasar takes about 2 volumes in whatever volume of Tanakh with commentaries. Yet the 5 Megillas all fit into one. So Treyasar, Chazal say, their smallness. Chazal put them all together. They have the kedusha of one book. They are one book. But it's very clear. It tells you this is the book of Hosea. This is the words of Amos. This is Yonah. This is etc. Each one. So when they did collect books of Nevi'im and put them all together, to make one book, they told you so. They didn't hide it. So why did they just do that with Yeshayahu? Ad Hena Divrei Yeshayahu. And then say, Divrei, anonymous Babylonian prophet of the negative 5th century. Anonymous Judean prophet of the negative 4th century. Why did they do that with Deutero and Trito Isaiah? More than that, you said Sefer Tehillim. Tehillim is like that too. Tehillim takes works from, psalmists, at least from Moses. If you say Eson HaMizrachi is Avram Avinu, it starts in Moshe Rabbeinu's time and goes until when? Pshat, when's the latest Tehillim? The Babylonian exile by the rivers of Babylon. It's obviously a composite book. It even has a part, one of the books of Tehillim, in the middle ends with Kalat Filoth David ben Yishai. This is the end of what David ben Yishai. This is the end of his prayers. And that talks about Asaph and the rest of them, right? Yedusun. So the book of Tehillim is obviously a composite, and it tells you who wrote all of it. But more than that, there's another book that's composited. The book of Ezra is like that. It begins with that which transpired before Ezra, and then it introduces Ezra. And Ezra's talking the first person, like, after all these means, I, Ezra, son of so-and-so, and I went up from Babylonia. And then it begins, what? This is the words of Nehemiah. Okay? This is Nehemiah's book. So obviously Ezra is composited from how many different books? 3 books, and it lets you know it. And the same with Divrei Yamim. Divrei Yamim takes everything starting from Adam Rishon all the way to the end of the Tanakh era. It puts it all together, and it's very clear that it's a composite. So with all this in mind, I find it ridiculous that for some whatever reason, I wouldn't say it's Chazal, it's whoever, the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the last sealers of the Jewish Bible, would for some reason, sinister reason, I don't know, just because they couldn't, they made one of these composite books, but they didn't tell us. They tried to hide that fact from us. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, because why would they? They never did it. Okay? What are they trying to hide?